Hello and welcome to St Etheldreda's Church in Ely Place in London. This church is situated just outside the city walls of Old London, and on their way to Tyburn, the martyrs from the Tower of London or from Newgate Prison would have passed this church. Although the area is now surrounded by buildings, if you could cast your mind back 600 to 700 years and you looked around then, you would have seen fields, meadows, cows grazing, sheep grazing, farmers working in the fields. All that has now changed. But in the church behind us, it does retain a lot of that history. It must be remembered that bishops in medieval times were not only lords spiritual, but also lords temporal. And a lot of bishops were members of the king's privy council, and they would advise the king on worldly matters as well. So it was important that the bishops had some place to live in London, because they would be having to come to London several times a year. Now, the area here we see was gifted to the bishopric of Ely by one of the parishioners there. And on this land, he built his palace, and the only two segments that exist are this chapel here and one other which we will see later. As you enter St Etheldreda's, you will see on your right here a map. It's a very simple map, lacking in detail, but right in the middle of it, number 1 is St Etheldreda, and around St Etheldreda's are 10 other sites which were either prisons or places of execution for Catholic martyrs. The fact that St Etheldreda's is right in the centre of all this underpins the concept of martyrdom that permeates this church. Welcome to the crypt at St Etheldreda's. As you can see, it is being prepared for a function. Many, many years ago, it was also a tavern, and the carousing that went on here could be heard rising through the rafters to the church above. Not only was it a tavern, it was also an air raid shelter during the Second World War, where people would come and shelter from the bombs during the Blitz of London. But the most important thing about this crypt is that it is also a cemetery. Beneath the floor here, there lies bones. When the Catholics bought this church in the 1870s, it underwent a period of refurbishment, which meant digging up the crypt, and they found some bones. And they then discovered that these bones related to an event that happened 200 years before. It was called the Doleful Vespers, and it took place not very far from here in the French ambassador's residence. At that time, there was this element that we have today of diplomatic immunity, and in the ambassador's residence there were 2 Jesuits, and they were going to give a sermon, a homily, followed by Vespers. And it was so popular, the word got around that 200 to 300 people actually met in the garret of the ambassador's residence. There were so many people crammed in that the building could not take the weight. Those people who were killed when the building collapsed were not allowed a public burial because they were Catholics. The Bishop of London at the time forbade it, and therefore there were 2 great big pits dug, and the bodies were buried in them, except for 18. 18 bodies were taken by the Spanish ambassador who lived at the palace at the time, and he took them here and he buried them. And he buried them here in the crypt. When you enter St Etheldreda's, you turn right into a long corridor, and it's when you're walking along this corridor that you suddenly realise just how historical this place is, because there are still here standing the walls that were built 800 years ago. and you will still see plinths on those walls, some with statues on, some without, which would have been removed during the time of the Reformation. But as you approach the entrance to the chapel, you come across one of the most interesting features, because here to the right must be the most historical water font in the country. Over the centuries, thousands of people would have dipped their fingers in this font, blessed themselves, and walked up the stairs into the church. As you ascend the steps to the chapel, you will see here on your left the royal coat of arms. Now, this used to be situated in the chapel, but when the Catholics took it over, they removed it, because during Reformation times, the royal coat of arms in the church sent the message that the monarch was supreme here. By moving it outside, the Catholics sent the message, the Pope is supreme here. Okay, if you look behind me, you will see this huge stained glass window. It is the biggest stained glass window in London. And when you think of places like Westminster Abbey, St. Paul's Cathedral, Westminster Cathedral, and the two Southwark cathedrals, that is quite a distinction. Now, this window was gifted by the German, French, Italian, and Spanish embassies, and it was installed in 1964. And if you look at the very top there, you will see the papal coat of arms of John XXIII, who was Pope at the time. If you look at the central theme, you will see Christ rising from the Tyburn tree. On the right side, you will see pictures of the crucifixion. And on the left side, you will see scenes of martyrdom of the English martyrs. And right at the base, in the central position, you see the first 5 English martyrs, almost as if they're forming a foundation on what was to follow. As we gaze at the window in the east wing, as we proceed down the aisle towards the end of the church, there is a huge stained glass window. And in the centre of that is the image of the risen Christ. To the right we see our Blessed Lady, and on the left stands St. Joseph. To St. Mary's left we see St. Ethelreda, holding an image of the monastery she founded, where Ely Cathedral now stands today. Above is the scene of her death, surrounded by her followers. And to the right of St. Joseph, there is an image of St. Bridget of Kildare, in recognition of the many Irish workers who settled in the parish in its early days. In the bottom left-hand corner is the coat of arms of the Rosminian order, and in the other corner is the Eucharistic emblem, symbolized by the pelican feeding its young with its own blood. If you look to the right of the altar, there is a casket which holds the uncorrupted hand of St. Ethelreda, and was given to the church at its consecration by the Arundel family. This family remained staunchly Catholic during the Reformation, and gave us the martyr St. Philip Howard and his grandson, Viscount Stafford, who was the last English layman to be martyred in 1680. The Arundel family kept St. Ethelreda's hand safely and in secret for hundreds of years. When you come to a church like St. Ethelreda's, you are overcome by the amount of history that is to be found in a building like this. What we have done is simply scrape the surface. What you have seen and heard is very much the tip of the iceberg. If you really want a true sense of what a place like this is really all about, you have to come and visit it yourself.